Jurisdictions. All legal entities must be registered against a jurisdiction that is governed by a legal authority. In other words, a jurisdiction is a combination of legislative category, which could include labor law, transactional tax law, income tax laws, insurance law, security law, or ground transportation law, or so on. So, a jurisdiction is a combination of legislative category and the physical territory to which the legal rules are grounded. So what is the physical territory over here? The physical territory could be a country, a county, or a state. So in case of New Zealand, since it's a small country, you've got the jurisdiction as New Zealand. And of course, the physical territory is New Zealand. And in relation to jurisdictional for the laws, all laws applies, which includes all the ones I have written over here plus many more. Whereas if you go to US, then the tax system out there is a bit complex. So it's 3 levels: state, county, city. So at the top it's the country USA, then you've got the state, within that you've got the county, and within county you've got the city. That's the entire combination will determine a precise jurisdiction within a geographical area. A tax jurisdiction is a geographical area where a tax is levied by a specific tax authority. For example, the tax jurisdiction for goods and services tax in Singapore is the country of Singapore, which is exactly like that in New Zealand, that the tax jurisdiction for New Zealand territory is the country of New Zealand. So both the countries, Singapore and New Zealand, they are very small countries, so hence they've got a simple tax system, whereas larger economies like USA have got a complicated tax system. You need to set up jurisdictions before creating registrations, because a jurisdiction is required when creating a registration. So if you recall, in the previous movie I was showing you the definition of the legal entity, which is where we have gone to the registration form and I've talked about jurisdiction. Hence you've got to predefine it, but there are times that for some countries it is already seeded in Oracle applications and you don't have to worry about it. But if it is not, then you've got to define it. And where do you define it? You can either define it in going to Oracle eBusiness tax module, or you can add that function of defining the jurisdiction in just next to Accounting Setup Manager within Oracle General Ledger responsibility. So I'm going to quickly show you that form so that you remember what I'm saying. So look at that registration form. You remember jurisdiction, that's what it is. I was referring to this. If you click on update, it's going to show us this. So this must be predefined, because if it is not predefined, you will not be able to define the registration and associate it with a legal entity. And as I said, the place you have to define that is in eBusiness tax module. So let's see if you've got that responsibility. I can quickly show you that one. Tax Manager Vision Operations USA. If you go here, go to Home, and then it's going to open a HTML based form, and within that one you've got to define over here. So let's see if we can see it. Right here. So as you could see, one of the functions over here is create tax jurisdiction. So if you click on that one, you would be able to create a new tax jurisdiction by clicking on this form. Okay. So more about this I've explained you in my course in Oracle eBusiness Tax. Feel free to take that course if you like. Okay, so going back, so that's the place you attach the jurisdiction while you are registering your legal entity as a part of your enterprise structures, legal entity setup in eBusiness Suite. So let's see if you've got anything else. When a legal entity or establishment registers with a jurisdiction, there may be a set of functions that it needs to perform, such as a payment or income tax declaration. Legal functions can be predefined in the jurisdiction to facilitate the registration process. So going back to this screen, you can see there is something called as legal functions, and here is the place you can add those legal functions once you have added the other information. So you've got to add all that, then you can come down and add the function here. Okay. When a registration is created, the specific functions of jurisdiction can be assigned to legal entity or establishment. Legal functions that are defined as required on the jurisdiction are by default assigned to the legal entity or establishment during registration. So remember that one, and you would be able to see that while we are registering our legal entity. Legal authorities. A legal authority is a governing legal body that operates within a jurisdiction. The legal authority is responsible for enforcing legislation, collecting fees and taxes, and making financial appropriations within a given physical area for a type of law. As an example, the Inland Revenue Service in the US is a legal authority for income tax law. Similarly, in New Zealand, a legal authority here is Inland Revenue, or which is also called as IRD. When a legal entity registers under a given jurisdiction, it may be related to a legal authority that is governing in that jurisdiction. Legal authority information is used on legal reports and financial statements in some countries and is determined by legislation of the jurisdiction. So what you have to specify on financial statements, whether you need to mention about your income tax or your legal authority or not. Defining a legal authority is not required for a legal entity to transact, and therefore is not required to create a registration. However, it's optional and it's a good idea that you define it, but it is defined as a part of your eBusiness tax setup. So the form is shared via eBusiness tax homepage. A legal authority is associated with a jurisdiction because it has authority over the legal entities that are registered within that jurisdiction. So in New Zealand, you've got the legal authority here as IRD or Inland Revenue, whereas in US, being a very large country, they may have legal authority based on state level as well. The relationship between the legal authority and the jurisdiction is formed when you create a legal entity registration. So if you recall, in the previous movie I've shown you the tab for registration. Each registration is made to a jurisdiction, and each registration can identify and issuing legal authority. So with that being said, I'm going to take you quickly to Oracle application forms. So here you can see this is the place for defining the legal authority, or in fact, let's go back quickly, and I'm going to go back again. So this is the page for, wherein I have queried the legal entity, or you can create a new legal entity if you like. And then if you go into the details of that, you see in the registration page here, you would see something called as the legal authority when you open that in update mode. So here you've got the jurisdiction that has been defined as United States income tax, and right here issuing legal authority is over here. So you've got to predefine that to attach it over here, and as I said in my slide, this is an optional field in the registration. However, if you define it and attach it with the legal entity, then it will be clear that this legal entity is in this jurisdiction belonging to this legal authority. And for defining a new legal authority, it's the same page I've shown you earlier. So if you go back to e-business tax module and navigate to the home page of tax manager, vision operations, and then go to home. So that's the place you would look for legal authority. If you drill down further, you can see create tax authorities, party tax profiles, create tax regimes, and create tax jurisdiction. So if you go into that, so let's say this one, you will have a place to define the tax authority. Okay, so I'm not going to go much into that as it is outside the scope of this particular course. However, I'm showing you all this form so that you're aware where this all can be defined. Generating the legal entity identifier. So if you recall from the legal entity definition form, I've shown you a place wherein you could see the legal entity identifier, which is like a unique number given. So let's go back to General Ledger Vision Operations USA Responsibility and then go to Accounting Setup Manager, and we query a legal entity so that you can see what I'm referring to. So that's the field I was referring to, legal entity identifier. If you click on details, it will appear on the top. Okay, so this legal entity identifier can be manually defined, which is what has been done, or you can automatically generate that. So if you would like to automatically generate that, then Oracle Applications has given you a method wherein you've got to set this profile option, XLE generate legal entity identifier, which is set at the system profile options level to automatically generate the identifier. So if you set this to yes, the legal entity identifier is generated automatically, whereas if you set it to no, you must enter the legal entity identifier manually. So we can go and have a look in the system options. So you've got to access that via the system administrator responsibility. So I'm going to go back and navigate to systems administrator here, and then further navigate to profile and system. Okay, and then here you can look for that particular profile, XLE. Okay, let's go back and look. Generate legal entity. So let's see. Okay, so that's the one. It's just LE. Okay, so presently it is no over here. So by default, I believe it's no, wherein you can give a manual way, whereas you've got two options, yes and no. So if you say yes, then it will be automatically generated, but if you say no, then it won't be automatically generated.